Just a disclaimer, the opinions expressed in this podcast are our own views and views of our guests. Nothing in this podcast is to be taken as legal advice.
LexisNexis is a proud sponsor of That's Just Criminal podcast. Remember, AI won't replace lawyers, but lawyers using AI will. Make LexisNexis your preferred legal AI research and productivity technology partner. Find out more at lexisnexis.co.nz. The That's Just Criminal podcast is proudly sponsored by the Criminal Bar Association of New Zealand. The CBA was set up in 1984 and provides support and collegiality to criminal practitioners in New Zealand, whether they are defence lawyers, prosecutors, judges, academics or students. For more information, visit www.criminalbar.org.nz. Now let's get on with the episode.
Because it was the 90s still, I just printed out lots and lots of copies of my CV, and I wanted to work in Auckland. So I went up to Auckland and just walked around every barrister's chambers that I could find and either handed in my CV or pushed it under the door and then waited for people to call me back. And I also faxed off, that's how 90s it was, I also faxed off a few from my dad's fax machine.
Kia ora, welcome to That's Just Criminal with me, Sumudu Thode, and my co-host,
Annabel Cresswell. Today in the studio, we've got a special guest, Jacob Barry, Crown Prosecutor and Partner from Meredith Connell.
Hi, everyone.
Warm welcome to you, Jacob, and I'll just tell the listeners what you're in here to discuss today. We've had a few questions about how you actually get into criminal law. Lots of young people and students seem to find that there's not a direct pathway into criminal law, and that does seem to be the case. And so we are here today to discuss how we got into criminal law, how you might get into criminal law, and how things have changed over time. He's the first prosecutor we've had on the show. We got asked questions last time about do you end up screaming and shouting and having actual fights with each other in the courtroom. Jacob is someone none of us have fallen out with, so we decided he was acceptable to come on the podcast today.
There was a total of one person that you had an opportunity to choose from, wasn't it?
Well, you're the first one that replied, so we just went with you.
You're not the only partner at the Crown that does Crown prosecutions, but we do like handsome men, and you are probably the most handsome. Well, that is something we've been criticised or validated for doing.
Well, we've got to give the listeners what they want. So another handsome man plus prosecutor.
Yeah, some of our listeners are men as well. So
plus you reply to text, so just go with it, Jacob.
Well, with that introduction, I can't wait to chat with you for the next 45 minutes.
So, Jacob, what made you do criminal law?
I know there will be a lot of people listening who are really, really passionate about criminal law and think that that's what they want to do from basically the moment they go to law school. They study criminal law, they take all the criminal law papers and things like that. That wasn't actually me. I kind of enjoyed it at uni, but what I really wanted to do was go to court, and criminal law is unquestionably the best way to do that, right? So if you're a law clerk at insert large law firm, Russell McVeigh, Chamatrat, Bell Gully, what have you, and you're in a litigation team, you're going to go to court maybe and sit in the back and watch some silk do something maybe, or you might turn up
for 10 years and then you get to go.
And look, if that floats your boat, totally fine. I'm not criticizing it, but that absolutely wasn't me. I wanted to get in court and to do stuff, and criminal law was kind of the vehicle to do that. And it's interesting, right? So the facts are always interesting. I think when you're younger, you have a slight air of invincibility about you, where the facts of these cases don't really kind of hit home to you in the same way as they possibly do when you get older. So you don't feel as daunted, I don't think, about entering the criminal law. You go through law school and you read.
You're not
cases,
as jaded,
and you're more idealistic and all that.
But that's sort of how I ended up with sort of like in a more sleepy way than probably some other people did. Annabel, what about you?
I have a question though for you. Why did you want to be in court?
Oh, because I'm an attention seeker.
Yes.
Agreed.
I like talking, but if you're an attention seeker, you like holding court literally. what better than doing a jury trial, right? So someone you get to stand there and someone has to listen
Has to listen to
not
you.
someone, 12 people, a judge, until you're interrupted. And look, I would be lying if I said there's no vanity aspect to it. That's just the reality of it. We all do it for that reason. That's kind of weird, but I just did, and I wanted to be in court. I can't probably explain that, but
yes. It was a
anyway,
calling.
sorry, Annabel, but I asked you a question earlier, which I've now forgotten.
I went to law school as a backup because I wanted to be an actress, and then I was told you've got to go to drama school, and then I couldn't get into drama school, and so then I did a few film papers at university, and I didn't really enjoy that. And so I just started focusing on the law side of it, but I still had that kind of dramatic streak. And so that's why I was like, oh, well, criminal law is the only one for me where I can just flounce about and have people listen to me. So I just started gravitating towards that. But I was at university in the 90s. There was no pathway. So the big firms used to come to law school and pick the top students and schmooze you. I wouldn't even know how to do those kind of laws that those big firms do. And there was no way that you to get into criminal law. So when I finished university, I just printed out, because it was the 90s still, I just printed out lots and lots of copies of my CV, and I wanted to work in Auckland. So I went up to Auckland and just walked around every barrister's chambers that I could find and either handed in my CV or pushed it under the door and then waited for people to call me back. And I also faxed off, that's how 90s it was, I also faxed off a few from my dad's fax machine. And some barristers were so nice and came back with letters saying, thank you for your CV, however, we don't have anything. And then now, in what I know to be so typical of criminal law, two barristers rang me and were like, can you start tomorrow? I just need someone to come and blah, blah, blah. And do you know how to do this? And do you know how to do this? And I had to choose really quickly between those two barristers. And they were both similar ages, about 38, nearly 40, and both needed quite a lot of help. So I picked one, not knowing who either of them were, and started very soon after that, and was just absolutely thrown in the complete deep end, but learnt quite a lot from there.
And the deep end, right? So my experience of criminal law is it often does feel like the deep end. The learning curve is so steep because it's one barrister, one junior. It's not like a team at a law firm where you've got 8 people working on a case. It's
sink or swim.
I just had this one guy, but he had 2 other barristers that he was in chambers with. One's now High Court judge, one's dead now, and they had juniors, and those juniors taught me more than anything else, because I think my first day was like, you go to Auckland District Court and get or do this call over. Didn't even know what a call over was. And then can you be in Manukau this afternoon? So that was my first appearance, was the stress of traffic and driving and not knowing what the hell was going on. And so, but the other juniors were like, this is what you do. This is where you park. This is what you say. That was how I learnt by fire.
Doing.
Yeah. And I can't say I did it well.
That's so true, though. You learn from people around you as opposed to your seniors. I think we can all say that we've learned and been given more tips and tricks from people our own stage. I was going to say age, but probably not age, but own stage, because you're kind of in the firing line together.
Yeah, and I think as well, I now hire people on the fly like that. I'll find someone and I'll be desperate and I'll be like, okay, you seem fine. You can string a sentence together. You've got a law degree. And if they seem passionate about criminal law, you're hired. So I can so understand now, looking back, why those barristers just went on the fly. There was no big process. But then you guys would have been Jacob, it would have been different, because did you go straight into a firm which has actually had a proper hiring process?
No, you were a High Court clerk, weren't you?
Yeah, so I went from uni and then did 2 years as a Judges Clerk. It's quite a cool job. It's a really cool job. You get to work with High Court judges and you get all the cool and interesting cases, but it's also sets you up in some respects terribly for what then may come, because you're
were they nice to you?
They are lovely people, and they are real human beings, and they themselves have been lawyers and senior practitioners who have kind of moved on. But of course, they come with their own kind of area of gravitas, and the gulf between your respective levels of seniority is enormous. And you're just finishing university and you're now having to like write legal opinions for these people who have been around for kind of 20, 30 years, which is a really intimidating environment. And nothing like either of your experiences, right? Whether you're working at barristers' chambers or like at a large firm where you have like a large team of people and a lot of people of your own age and things like that. So that was quite a strange environment, but I really liked it. I think the difficulty it kind of lends itself to, well, sorry, I should start with the benefits, which is you get to experience a whole raft of like different, both criminal and civil, and you can kind of work out for yourself actually what you like. And I think probably through that process, I worked out I probably had a preference for kind of criminal law. I mean, I didn't hate civil by any stretch, which some people certainly do, but it sets you up, as I said earlier, with kind of unrealistic expectations because you've gone away and you've spent 2 years advising these people on really like lofty, random pieces of legislation, the equitable doctrine of I don't know what. And then in my case, you start at the Crown Prosecutor's office a couple of months later and you're then being thrown around in the Manukau District Court and being shouted at by a judge. And you're like, well, this is a lot more real life than sitting in a room writing a memo for a judge. Actually,
and fast paced and, you know, thinking on your feet, and you sort of don't have the luxury of researching for a day to write a page.
Oh, completely. And I don't think anybody truly appreciates how on the fly it can be at times. Like I recall occasions where, you know, you'd head to court and you had one of the things that the junior prosecutor is supposed to do is the bail list, and you'll deal with bail applications or people have breached bail and things like that.
Yeah.
But of course, people breach bail at any kind of time of the day. Then suddenly you might, like, I remember a few times I'd literally be on my feet. And this was kind of 2014. We didn't have like firm laptops or anything like that. So you basically went out to court for the day and then relied on people calling you to like tell you what exactly you were going to appear on. You had like no paper, and maybe the registrar might print something for you.
And your phone wouldn't have internet or, you know, your
well,
emails
I would have
or anything,
internet.
probably.
Wasn't that long ago, Sumudu.
Yeah, we're not talking that long ago. But you'd be on your feet arguing able a bail application, and some person who you've never seen in your life come and hands you a slip of paper to tell you about the next matter that you've got to argue on your feet.
Did they fax it to you like Annabel's CV?
I think he's talking in the 2010s, Sumudu, not the 90s.
I have never received a fax, I don't think, Sumudu. I hesitate to use the word fun because actually we're dealing with some pretty horrific circumstances of the offending, and also just people's backstories and their experiences growing up that bring them to court. But it's a really enjoyable job. It's a tremendously sad job. As I said it earlier, over time, it really does start to hit the sides. Each case kind of slowly grows on you. And I think maybe just as you get older and you're surrounded more by people who have got kids, if you don't have kids yourself, or you have nieces and nephews and you're doing a lot of cases involving really nasty sexual offending, it's impossible for that stuff to not kind of affect you. So it's important. If you are in the criminal law, you should be always speaking to people about these types of things to make sure that it's not getting you down too much, because no one's really...
Have we moved Jacob from how I got into law to advice for how to keep your wellness and mental health? We've gone through the whole career.
Can we cut me talking about being sad?
No, I want to cut back to that because that's actually a very important part of it. I was going to say I'd similar, but we'll listen to how Sumudu got into criminal law.
I couldn't be an architect because I couldn't draw. I couldn't be a doctor because I don't like blood. And then I wanted to do psychology, but there was a 3-hour psych lab, which was like 3 till 5 p.m. on a Friday. And you've got to remember, I went to Otago, and that is not study time on a Friday afternoon. So I didn't want to do psychology, but law lectures were earlier in the morning. So I decided to go to law school. And so law was kind of a fallback.
And you had to do one of the professions, obviously, did you?
Being a Sri Lankan, you had to be either an accountant. I didn't want to be an engineer.
I think it was important to have the Sri Lankan bit in there because otherwise it's like, why are you talking like those are the only things you could do?
But I completely understand what Jacob was saying about being a lawyer and going to court, because for me, that's what being a lawyer is, not sitting in an office reading contracts. So I think criminal law was kind of, I don't know, it's the only thing I ever wanted to do.
Yeah. And then a big thing about it I found with, and this is starting on the defence side, what I kept hearing when I started doing defence work from the barrister I worked for and a few others around was, you've got to have what it takes. You've got to have this resilience and this inner strength and this, do you have it? Do you have it? And I told my bird story on here before? We
No.
can edit it if I have. But my famous story from being an early barrister, I was trying to prove to the barrister I worked for that I had what it takes, because he kept saying, you've got to be strong and you've got to be able to listen to this stuff and you've got to have a strong stomach. And we were walking back from court one day and the barrister I worked for was going on about how he wasn't sure if I had what it took, and they used to be able to be really mean to you back in those days of the days of the facts. And then a car drove past and hit a bird, and the bird lay dying on the street.
I know the story.
and then he was like, "Oh, Annabel, that bird has to be killed. I've got Gucci shoes on. I can't do it. If you want to show me you've got what it takes, you need to go and kill that bird." And so in front of him, I couldn't be like, oh, yuck, I had high heels on, killed the bird with a high heel to prove to him that I had what it takes, and then went back to the office and waited till he'd gone before I was like, oh my God, I've just had to kill a bird. But, I showed it. And now I feel a little bit like I have so much more sympathy for him now. Actually, I think you do have to be able to do horrendous things, not kill a bird,
Not kill birds,
you do
though.
have to be able to hide your feelings, not cry, see revolting
Just keep
photos.
calm and carry on, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that is a big part of it.
The three of us here doing sex trials in particular, that's hard work. And particularly on the defense side, you have to ask some really awful questions at times, and it's not that pleasant, and you do have to have a steely resolve to be able to get through that.
Yeah.
I think it's also like what you start off with, because like my first day as a law clerk, so I was still doing profs, didn't have a practicing certificate, just my first day on the job, I was asked to put a trial file together for the barrister I was working for, because he was doing a jury trial in a couple of weeks. It was Anthony Dixon.
Are we supposed to know that person?
Chris, do you not know? Oh, Chris.
If you Google him and you'll know who I'm talking about.
Okay, who is he though, for listeners who might not know?
He was somebody who went on a back then meth rampage and cut somebody's arm off and shot somebody else, and this was the retrial, and this was my first file that like I printed and hole punched and got paper cuts and put together. And so like I didn't have the benefit of dealing with like a drink driving or a graffiti or whatever else that juniors start off with. My first file was a murder, so I kind of feel like nothing bothered me for years, because that was like my trial by fire. But like Jacob said, I think when it started to hit me was much later, when I started doing sex trials, and it was kids.
Yeah, once you have kids as well. It's a
it
little
was
bit
when
harder to have that.
My cousin, who I'm really close to, had 2 young daughters, and it was kids around their age, because they were the kids that I was closest to before I had my own. And I think that's when it started really hitting me. Going to court and questioning a 7-year-old about how they weren't sexually violated by their father, for example. That's what we have to do. But it hits you. It hits you all of a sudden, and you're like, shit, what I do is serious.
Yeah.
LexisNexis is a proud sponsor of That's Just Criminal podcast. Remember, AI won't replace lawyers, but lawyers using AI will. Make LexisNexis your preferred legal AI research and productivity technology partner. Find out more at lexisnexis.co.nz. The That's Just Criminal podcast is proudly sponsored by the Criminal Bar Association of New Zealand. The CBA was set up in 1984 and provides support and collegiality to criminal practitioners in New Zealand, whether they are defence lawyers, prosecutors, judges, academics or students. For more information, visit www.criminalbar.org.nz. Now let's get back to the episode.
I think we've talked about various points, kind of like steep learning curves. Annabel, do you want to talk about your sort of first trial as a kind of a defense or prosecutor
Oh,
where
Jesus Christ.
that
Yes.
I think it's important that we share that,
The trauma.
like, we're all like a reasonably far
Yeah.
along our careers now and feel really comfortable in doing what we're doing, but it's not
Yeah.
always that way.
I think one of the things when you're a criminal lawyer, the greatest ways that you learn are in the court and from the judges who tell you off for doing it wrong. And so most of us, I think, have just been sent into a trial without a senior there to tell you what to do. Or even if the senior is right there, the minute you're on your feet, they can't actually stop you. Or so I was sent in to do my first judge alone trial with no one else there to watch or anything like that. And I just in front of the grumpiest judge who had such high standards. And even I was told to say, "May it please your honour, I appear for the defendant." Counsel's name is Miss Cresswell. And I got as far as "I appear for," and he goes, "What's your name? You always say your name first. I don't know who you are." And it just went like that for the whole, everything I did. He told me off, and my client changed his story. And so he had added some in that I hadn't put. So then I got told off for not putting my case, but I didn't even know what that meant or what you do in those situations. So I just started going, well, let's recall the witness and I'll put it. And then the judge was like, "You don't tell me that I recall." And it was just debacle after
A
debacle.
train wreck.
Absolute train wreck. But do you know what? I believe that I won it, and with the help of the judge telling me what I should be doing and saying. And so it wasn't a complete travesty. So that was my first. Does anyone have anything worse?
What was your train wreck, Jacob?
I'd sort of dubbed it the trial of Albany's mystery masturbator. Spoiler alert, it remains a mystery.
I was just going to say, does he have a name now?
A chap who was caught relieving himself one Saturday morning along Albany Highway when caught by a group of joggers and was pursued.
Oh my God, I jog in Albany. This is weird.
I learned an awful lot. I learned, which was quite scary, was that there was a disclosure request made partway through. The issue was identification, with just the guy. And the disclosure request was made for all of the public masturbators or people who had been called into police, who are alleged to have been masturbating in public in the kind of North Shore area for like a 6-month period. And there was just an extraordinary number of people who do that, which really surprised me.
It's a thing.
It turns out that that's a
Welcome to the North Shore, everybody.
Welcome to the North Shore, yes, yeah. But I just remember being in the court and going in thinking like, this is a really basic case. The facts are really simple. It's only going to be like a 1 or 2 day trial. Like I've got everything prepped to within an inch of its life. And then you go and do it, and it's like, blah, 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 blah. I have no idea what I'm like doing. I think like the first key witness was my identification witness, and like I just kind of got so nervous I didn't even turn to page 3 of her statement where she described what the person looked like. And I like almost sat down, and the judge was like, "I think you're not quite done yet." So I look back now and I'm like, oh my God, and I was really grateful that no one sort of was like laughing out loud at me when I was so useless.
Just behind your back.
Just during the breaks.
Just during the breaks, that's right, but not during court. And look, it remains a personal record for me, a 5-minute acquittal. I didn't even manage to get a sandwich.
Wow. I've not heard of a 5-minute. The earliest one I'd heard of was 11 minutes.
Oh, see, I had 2.5 minutes.
Oh, did you? My
Yeah,
God.
and this was my second jury.
That's a brag, Sumudu, because
No, but see,
You're
no,
a
no,
defense counsel. Yeah.
yeah,
It's a humble brag.
But see, the thing was, so this was my second jury trial by myself, and I had to do it because my barrister at the time had booked a trip to New York, didn't put it in his calendar, and had booked and had this jury trial listed. And so he was like, well, I'm not cancelling New York, you do the jury trial. And then I was like, sure, I can do a jury trial. How hard can it be, And
Full
it
of
was
that
like
confidence that you were talking about earlier, Jacob,
Ego.
that you have when you're young. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was like 27 charges of fraud. And bless him, my senior had organised this other lawyer to kind of like babysit me. He was more senior than me, but didn't know the law. He did the opening. No, seriously, on day one, he did the opening address, and then the judge had to abort the trial because he said something that you just should not have said in his opening. And this judge kind of pulled me into chambers and was like, listen, we're going to start again tomorrow. You're not coming back with him. You'll be here by yourself and don't do that opening. Like, you'll be fine. You're good. And so I had to run this. I didn't have my senior, who was in New York, different time zone, couldn't contact him. The senior he got for me, let's not talk about his competence.
Forget about him now. Yeah.
And so I had to run this trial, and I was so nervous. I'd never done a jury trial by myself. It was an absolute train wreck, but I was still like packing my laptop up after the jury went out when they knocked on the door and came back with not guilty on everything. 2.5 minutes.
Did you do an amazing case like Legally Blonde straight out of law school?
No.
Or did you have an amazing case?
No, I reckon they just felt really sorry for me because I had no idea what I was doing. I'm certain to this day that it's because they felt sorry for me and was like, that woman is clueless. Like, let's just give this to her because she's probably never going to win anything in her life.
Or like, can we just go home? Like,
yeah.
Let's not even deliberate. Let's just go
Well,
immediately home.
I thought they'd want lunch at least, but I don't care if it's pity. I'll take it.
That's quite impressive, Sumudu. The only thing that I can say to top that, but in the other respect, which beats my 5 minutes, and that's why I don't get too down about it, is there is another Crown Prosecutor in Auckland who's among the best, if not the best, going around, and I'm happy to name him Robin McCoubry, who tells a story that when the judge sent the jury out having delivered the summing up to go and deliberate, the foreperson said, "Did we have to?"
Yeah.
And then said, "Yeah, you sort of do a bit," and then they were out for a few minutes and then came back.
And they came back.
And with not guilty.
Yeah.
Oh, good on Robin.
That is good.
Robin can have this round.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from watching other people, but so much about what not to do. You sit in a list court or you watch a trial and you listen to what the lawyers say or the prosecutor or whatever, and you listen to how the judges react or...
Yeah, totally. So that's how we all got into it. Does anyone know from visiting universities and things if there's better, easier pathways into criminal law? The Criminal Bar Association get invited now to the universities to talk about criminal law. So I think that's one pathway that barristers come down.
Back then, like you say, you kind of just had to know somebody or completely put yourself out there and hope like how somebody would hire you. Nowadays, you can sort of look people up on LinkedIn or you can look up a website. Like those days, most people didn't even have websites. And so I think lawyers are more accessible.
I have someone working for me now who, I'm sure she won't mind me saying, she didn't know anyone how to get into criminal law. Her mum was a hairdresser and her mum was doing the hair of a junior of mine. And so it got back to me, oh, this girl wants to go into criminal law. And I was like, send her in. She came in to do work experience. She was prepared to work for free. And then my law clerk quit. And so I was like, okay, can you turn up tomorrow and I'll
take you on.
Yeah. So that is a pathway as well, if your mum's a hairdresser.
I've got an ex-registrar, somebody who was a court registrar, and I saw them in court, interacted with them. They didn't annoy me every time I went to court. I was like, I'll take you on. Actually, I have two registrars, ex-registrars. But the other thing is that, now, depending on where you are, there's the Public Defence Service as well, which wasn't an option when we started out.
No. And they must do recruitment drives and go to the unis, do they? And try and get people out of law school. And I assume the Crown, with all its resources, also, do they, Jacob, go to law schools and...
That's such a phrase that's always used, the Crown with all its resources.
I know, I love it.
My take on entry into criminal law compared to days gone by, to the extent that I understand it, it's probably a good opportunity here to talk about how the Crown warrant system actually works in New Zealand and how you are and how prosecutors work more generally. Because
go on then, make it interesting,
make it quick,
snappy and funny.
This is not an ad for the Crown.
No, it's not. New Zealand has a really unique system, right? We have private law firms running our criminal prosecution service, right?
Yeah.
And so private law firms who can do all manner of things between prosecuting conveyancing, civil litigation, commercial litigation are running criminal prosecutions, like the firm where I'm at. And that happens in a large number of places around the country. It happens up in particular in Northland. I know that's where you practice a lot, Sumudu. And so I think bigger kind of crown firms have more opportunities for people to do criminal work and come into there and get more exposure to criminal work. So that's one way that people get exposure to it, is through that. And as you say, also the PDS now is a firm-like environment, I think. I think I would have to probably describe it as slightly more ad hoc ways, right? Like you find the opportunities with individual barristers, but it's easier to access them than probably it was because of easier places to market.
There's a lot more barristers now. There's a lot more chambers now. So I think there's certainly a lot more opportunities than there was when we started practicing.
Yeah, there was only a few of only the kind of top barristers could take a junior, where it seems a lot of people take on juniors. But there's also the police prosecution service and all of the ministries. And I should say, after the bird incident, I left and went to work for the Ministry of Social Development and their prosecution team for a while too. And that was really good because I just got experience after experience. I was the only prosecutor there. I just didn't have a lot of people to learn from, but that was another way of doing it. And then went back to the Defence Bar eventually after that. So all those ministries also have opportunities.
I think you've talked about it on a previous episode, Annabel, but Sumudu and I both kind of only come from really either end of the spectrum. We've only done one thing, but I've always thought that the criminal profession is really open, accepting people jumping around. If you want to practice criminal law, you should be prepared to do both. I think it just so happens that Sumudu and I have respectively just done one thing. I think people really need to be open to doing both sides of it.
I think so, but also I think you just naturally have a preference. So whenever I prosecute, I don't mind prosecuting, and I think it's good skills and it's a good skill set. But I always am like seeing it from the other side and just leaning towards, and I want to know the people, where you get to know the people that you're defending much better on the defence side. And I know prosecutors that just way prefer prosecuting. So I don't know if there's anybody that just is equally happy to do both sides.
We talked about it in episode 2 with Rishi, like he was saying with the Victorian Bar, they're like die-hard defence lawyers. You kind of don't have people that do both. Whereas New Zealand's really different because you could do, you could be a defence lawyer like yourself, Annabel, but then do Crown prosecutions as well. So you could be defending somebody this week, but next week you could be prosecuting someone. Whereas, like, I've only ever done defence, to be honest, to probably my mother's disappointment, only want to do defence.
And is it same as you, Jacob? Do you ever want to do some defence?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think that, to your point, the people side of it, Annabelle, I think is a really good one because I think you experience the people or the personal side of it quite differently. The personal experience, I think, say, as a prosecutor, is you're dealing a lot with the police directly, and you're not often dealing throughout the life of a case with witnesses and the people who are connected to the case. You only get that experience when you're really at trial, which is always felt to me quite a cold way of going about it. It's almost like this is a weird analogy, but it's sort of like, a surgeon you never really meet until they come up and then cut you open.
But I mean, we get to, not just the clients, we get to know their parents and their partners and their kids and their whole family, who think they can call you on a daily basis sometimes. But, you get to know so much more than just what's on paper. And I think that is part of what makes this job really interesting for me and keeps me going. It's that personal connection. And I think that has more capacity for change for clients as well.
It seems a lot harder to get bored, right? It's constantly interesting and challenging.
Yeah.
Much easier to get old and cynical. To finish up, Annabel, can you think of 2 or 3 things that we can tell junior lawyers or somebody wanting to get into criminal law that they should have in mind when they apply for their first job?
I think if you're wanting to work in criminal law, you tell the people that you really want to work in criminal law. Let them know that you're passionate about it. We get CVs sent to us. I always like people showing the initiative and sending CVs and saying what they might have done to try and get into criminal law. But I also just want to see you can string a sentence together and that you've got some courage and some resilience. So I'll usually have a coffee with someone and see if they've got that. I'll just be like, would you kill a bird in the street? And then
and can you send faxes?
Yeah. So you sort of want to see that they've got that that resilience, but you can often tell that from people, I think, quite early on. What do you guys look for if you're hiring?
I'm the same. We get CV sent all the time, a couple a week. And for me, if the CV is addressed to Mr. Thode, that's a clear no. And you'd be surprised the number of times I get it. I'm like, you want to work for me? Know who I am.
Google it.
Yeah, Google my name, look at the photo. Do not send me a letter to Mr. Thode.
But having said that, like I got one recently that said, I really want to get into criminal law. I've asked around and I've heard you are an excellent criminal barrister. Would you consider my CV? And I was like, I know this is just cut and paste and you've sent it to every barrister in town, but I still like it. And yes, I will consider you. So I think a little bit of flattery as well. At least look like you've done the research.
If you get a CV saying, I want to work for you, I think you're amazing, I really want to do family law. You're like, you don't know who I am. You're just lying. Flattery is fine, but true flattery.
Get it right.
Yeah. I'm a real stickler for like formatting, and I like to see a cover letter. Don't just send me your CV with no cover letter. I want a cover letter because it shows a bit of personality, shows a bit of oomph. I can see that you know where to put full stops and space a letter out.
Yeah.
Jacob, it has been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you tonight. Thank you for giving up your Friday night. We really appreciate it.
Very interesting to hear your tips and tricks and your experience in the criminal law and your thoughts on wellness and keeping yourself safe. In the criminal law practice.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. I really enjoyed it. And I do encourage everybody to get involved in the criminal law. It's a fun time.
Okay.
There's nothing else that I would rather do.
Day in, day out. Living the dream. That was a lot of fun having another one of our friends but foes on the episode tonight, Sumudu, wasn't it? I learnt a little bit from Jacob, how he sees the world.
Oh, and actually stories about you that I haven't heard before as well.
We're learning something new every day. So thank you very much for listening to That's Just Criminal with me, Annabel Cresswell, and my co-host,
Sumudu Thode.
We are sponsored by LexisNexis and the Criminal Bar Association.
Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast.